I showed up for a family reunion that I had paid for myself. The cabin was empty. My mom laughed and said, "We had it yesterday. You always make things awkward." I just nodded and went home. The next morning, my phone blew up with 68 missed calls. My name is Michael and I'm 32 years old. Just a few months ago, I was the one in my family who was remembered only when it was time to fork out the cash. You probably know the type: quiet, lonely, and reliable. I work in tech in Silicon Valley. I don't have kids. And I don't have any special expenses. At least, that's how it looked to my family. They even called me reliable. Although I always thought that was just a polite way of saying useful. Someone who could be used without much ceremony. And you know what? Most of the time, they were right. I didn't make a fuss when my sister Jessica forgot to pay me back the $8,000 I'd given her to help with her apartment down payment in San Francisco. I didn't complain when my cousin Trevor stayed with me for 3 months in my Palo Alto place, promising to get back on his feet any minute, and then disappeared without leaving a cent for rent or utilities. And even when my parents asked me to co-sign their second mortgage after my father's construction business collapsed during the 2020 recession, I silently signed the papers at Wells Fargo. I was always the invisible character who held the whole stage while everyone else was playing out their colorful, chaotic performances. But this time, things went differently. It all started with a family reunion. We have them every summer, moving from one house to another, depending on who has more space. And then a couple of years ago, I bought a decent house in Mountain View with a pool and a large backyard. And it immediately became clear that now all the meetings must take place at my place. The first year I approached the matter with all my might. I ordered barbecue catering from a local joint, organized entertainment for the children, even rented a bounce house from Party City. Of course, no one offered to compensate me for the $1,200 expenses. But I waved it off. After all, it's family. Right. The following year, I took everything upon myself again. There were noticeably fewer thanks, but more complaints. Some people didn't have enough choice of craft beers. Others were outraged by the lack of gluten-free options. I kept quiet then, although everything was boiling inside. And this year I suggested changing the format: rent a cabin in Lake Tahoe for the weekend to spend time in a new place. And I was ready to pay for everything myself through Airbnb. The family happily seized on the idea. Even my mom called to tell me how proud she was that I had finally taken the initiative and taken on the role of organizer. That phrase stuck in my head for a long time. As if 2 years in a row of me throwing parties and paying for Christmas dinners on my own didn't count as initiative. But I swallowed it. I found a great rental cabin through a colleague that suited our needs. It was a cozy A-frame house on the lake with 6 bedrooms, a game room, kayaks, and all the amenities of a mountain retreat. It wasn't cheap. To be honest, $2,800 for the weekend. But has that ever stopped me? After all, I'm the reliable one. I booked it on VRBO, sent out invites through GroupMe, even created a shared Google Drive document with directions, room assignments, and dietary preferences. I approached the matter like a true event planner. To be honest, I was even looking forward to it. I thought that this year everything would turn out differently. How wrong I was. We planned the meeting for the second weekend of June. I left Apple early on Friday, bought a bunch of groceries at Whole Foods, threw everything into my Tesla, and set off on a 3-hour journey to Tahoe. On the way, I also stopped at Starbucks to pick up my mother's favorite decaf blend. Because last year, she complained that the regular stuff supposedly gave her a headache. I remember the moment when I pulled up to the cabin. The sun was breaking through the pine trees. The trunk was bursting with supplies. My iPhone was silent as if under a spell. That should have alerted me right away. I unloaded my things, wrote a message in the family group chat: arrived. The place is just wonderful. Can't wait for you all to see it. There was no answer. An hour passed. Then another. I figured they were just running late as usual. Nothing new there. Right, I fired up the Weber grill, poured myself a beer, turned on my Spotify playlist, trying to set the mood. But a strange feeling had already settled inside. Finally, I called my mother. She picked up on the third ring, her voice sounding amused, like I was calling to tell her a joke. "Oh, honey," she sang. "Did you really drive up there?" I didn't even realize at first what she meant. "What do you mean? Drive up? I've been here for 2 hours. Where is everyone?" I asked, not believing my ears. "We did it yesterday," she replied in the same cheerful tone. "Everyone decided it would be more convenient that way. You know how you can be a little intense sometimes. People feel constrained around you." I stood on the deck with the phone to my ear. The pines rustled softly around me, and smoke from the unattended grill lazily drifted through the mountain air. "So you changed the date and didn't even tell me?" I finally managed. "It's easier this way," she replied calmly. "Les dramas. No hurt feelings. You always say yourself that you prefer peace and quiet." What did I tell her then, honestly? I don't remember. I probably just hung up. I didn't throw a tantrum or burst into tears. I just stood there and looked at the lake, feeling like the most naive fool in the world. Then I turned off the grill, put my things back in the car, and drove the 3 hours home in silence. When I got there, I didn't even bother to unpack the groceries from Whole Foods. Just shoved the bags in the fridge and collapsed into bed. And the next morning, I was greeted by a real storm. 68 missed calls. My iPhone vibrated so much it rolled off the nightstand. Messages poured in from everyone. From my dad. From Jessica. From Trevor. And even from people who hadn't thought about me in years. It turns out that when I left that Tahoe cabin without saying anything or making a scene, I didn't just slam the door, I stopped paying their mortgage. It turns out that I had been the sole guarantor of that second mortgage through Bank of America for the last 2 years. My parents had promised to take over payments in 6 months. But when they started having financial difficulties again, I didn't want to let things get to the point of foreclosure. And, with a heavy heart, I simply continued paying the $3.400 monthly payment myself. The automatic payment was supposed to go through that very weekend. Usually, I would go into the BOFA app and transfer everything manually, month after month. But this time, I didn't even open the app. I didn't transfer the money. Didn't call the bank. Didn't do anything at all. And now my phone was red hot from their calls. As if the house was actually on fire. I sat on my bed, staring blankly at the screen, watching the WhatsApp messages multiply at an alarming rate. "Michael, please call me back. This isn't funny. We didn't mean to hurt you. We can talk this through." Some said. My favorite was from Jessica. "You're being so immature. It's time to grow up." I put the phone on the nightstand. I slowly got up, made myself some coffee in my Keurig, went out onto my back deck and settled into a chair, enjoying the chirping of the birds. It was the most peaceful morning I had had in years. And as a light breeze began to chime the wind chimes, it suddenly dawned on me. Maybe being reliable for the family was never a compliment. Maybe it was just a fancy name for someone you could walk all over. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to go back to being their safety net. But the best part was yet to come. None of them even guessed that I wasn't just carrying their mortgage. I was also paying homeowners insurance and property taxes through Zillow's payment system. And I was quietly dealing with the HOA issues. After his father's construction business failed, he began to get creative in unexpected ways. He was particularly annoyed by the Homeowners Association's requirement for standard mailboxes. He ended up making himself something out of wrought iron with decorative flames, a real work of art. But the Marin County HOA was not thrilled. He was fined twice and threatened with legal action. And guess who brought in a lawyer friend to settle the matter? Me. Of course. And, as usual, I didn't say a word to anyone about the $200 legal fees. I just fixed everything for them until one day I stopped. So not making that mortgage payment turned out to be more than just a late payment. It was the first domino in a spectacular chain reaction. On Monday, Bank of America called me. The voice was polite and professionally courteous. "Mr. Thompson, we wanted to check if the payment will be received today." I paused, holding the phone to my ear, and smiled. "No," I said calmly. "Not this time." There was silence on the other end. but the customer service rep didn't push. I understand. Just please note that if payment is not made, the account may go into default by the 15th. I thanked her, ended the conversation, and immediately turned off my phone for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, a whole drama was unfolding in the family GroupMe chat, which I had not even opened since that ill-fated reunion. My friend Sarah, who, by a strange coincidence, was still in that chat from when she used to help organize Christmas presents for all the nieces and nephews, kept me informed of what was happening. She started sending me screenshots. Jessica wrote, "He's seriously going to leave mom and dad homeless over this." Trevor immediately jumped in. "Is he really doing this? Just because we changed the date of the reunion, Uncle Dexter got involved. I told you there was something off about him. And then mom showed up. I'll remember her message forever." She wrote, "I didn't raise Michael to be vindictive. He's always been overly sensitive. This is just him having a meltdown. He'll calm down." A meltdown. After all I'd done for them. After all the bills I'd covered through Zelle and Venmo. The crises I'd quietly resolved. And the silent help I'd given them over the years. My quiet withdrawal was now called a meltdown. I didn't say anything. Just sat there and processed it. I thought about how easily I'd let them label me over the years. The quiet, sensitive, reliable son. It's funny how those words sound flattering for so long before you realize what they really mean. But I wasn't going to stay silent this time. I had a meeting with my financial advisor at Charles Schwab the next day, a routine checkup on my portfolio. Nothing serious. I had been quietly saving up to buy a rental property. Something modest in Oakland or San Jose. Perhaps to generate passive income. But when the consultant asked if I wanted to continue with that plan, I suddenly hesitated. Then said, "Actually, I want to close the joint account." She looked up from her paperwork. "The one with the Thompson house?" she asked. Yes. That was it. It was a joint account we set up when I co-signed the mortgage, so I could more easily make payments on their behalf. I never gave my parents access to it. But now I was done playing guardian. I withdrew all the remaining funds, about $47. Not out of resentment, but out of principle. Because for the first time in a long time I wanted to do something for myself. Not for them. I didn't have to wait long for the consequences. The first message arrived almost immediately. It was sent by my father through email. And perhaps it was the first message of his in my entire life that didn't include some forwarded conspiracy theory. Or, "Send this to 10 people or bad luck will follow." It was laced with guilt. Full of phrases like, "We didn't want to push you away. And you know how your mother gets." And, of course, the classic family doesn't keep score. And it was that last phrase that struck me the most. Because I'd never really kept score. Never written down how many times Jessica had called me crying at 2 a.m. begging me to Venmo her tuition money. I didn't remind Trevor about the $1,800 I wired him to avoid jail time for unpaid parking tickets in San Francisco. I didn't lecture Mom about calling in panic about the leaking roof that Dad stubbornly pretended not to notice. I just helped without looking back. And now? As soon as I stopped, everyone suddenly had a detailed list of grievances about who owed what to whom. They thought I owed them everything. A week passed. Then another. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings. Jessica tried calling through Instagram. I didn't answer. Trevor sent a LinkedIn message. I didn't even open it. My dad sent a handwritten letter through USPS unopened. And then came what I now call the real blow. One morning I was sitting in a Peet's Coffee, enjoying a cinnamon scone, AirPods in, pretending indifference to the world around me, when I suddenly received a text from Aunt Caroline. She, unlike the others, always stayed out of family drama. The same aunt who, as a child, secretly brought me homemade cookies at Christmas, even when my mother thought I had enough sugar. The message from her was short: "You should check Facebook." I opened the app and saw that Mom had posted on her timeline. It said, "Imagine raising a child, loving him, supporting him, and then he turns his back on you at your most difficult moment. Some people only care when they're being praised for it." I think that speaks for itself. The post received hundreds of likes and dozens of comments. Sympathetic neighbors, church friends, even an old college roommate of my mom's. Everyone competed to express support for the woman who had recently laughed at me on the phone while I stood alone on the empty deck of the cabin I had paid for through Airbnb. And then something inside me clicked. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt like I'd had enough. And enough wasn't just another passive-aggressive gesture. It was a decision that would change everything. Because if they thought losing their home was a nightmare, they had no idea what was coming next. I didn't respond to my mother's Facebook post. Didn't comment. Didn't react. Didn't make excuses to strangers who suddenly thought they were experts on my life. Instead, I just took a screenshot. Saved it in a folder on my MacBook with the telling name documentation. And calmly continued with my day. Although somewhere in the back of my mind, a plan was already beginning to form. Because they either forgot or never bothered to find out when I co-signed that mortgage with Bank of America. I wasn't just a guarantor, I was a co-owner of their home. I wasn't just a bystander. My name was on the deed. The house was legally mine as much as theirs. I let them live there. Paid their bills. Even financed a kitchen renovation when they thought it would increase the home's value. But for them, I was always just a safety net. A backup plan. That invisible support that propped up their crumbling financial structure. And now that I've stepped aside, they were beginning to understand what thin threads their entire lifestyle was hanging on. The foreclosure process moves fast in California. First, there are notices. Grace periods. Attempts to negotiate. But I was not going to drag out the process. I didn't want to destroy their lives. I just wanted my investment back. I contacted a lawyer in Palo Alto. Explained the whole situation, and asked what options I had to officially recover my share of the property. She listened to me attentively. Then leaned back in her chair and said something I will remember. For a long time, you've already been more generous than most people would be. But if you want to get serious about this, you could file for partition. I raised an eyebrow. Partition is a legal process that forces the sale of jointly owned property. And since I was listed as co-owner and my parents couldn't buy me out, the court would simply order them to sell the house and I would get my rightful share. A cold, ruthless measure. But exactly what was needed. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it for myself. To regain control of my life, which I had quietly lost somewhere along the way. And so I filed the papers in Santa Clara County Superior Court. 3 days after filing, I finally opened the family GroupMe chat. I had been ignoring all this time. The last message there was from Jessica. Will someone please talk Michael into acting like an adult already? I didn't answer her. Instead, I sent one quick text. The mortgage isn't your biggest problem. Check your email. No signature. No explanation. Just a warning. Less than 24 hours passed before the panic really set in. My phone was blowing up with missed calls and voicemails. Just like the morning after that ill-fated reunion. Even my father, who hadn't called me directly in over a year, left a voicemail. Michael, please. This is getting out of hand. There has to be another way. Jessica wrote a whole string of emails with the subject line, you are literally destroying our family. Trevor managed to call 7 times in a row through FaceTime. And then sent a desperate text. I will pay you back everything I owe you through Cash App. Just please don't do this to Mom and Dad. And Mom posted on Facebook again. This time it was much less subtle. Some people hide behind contracts and lawsuits when they lack the courage to even look their family in the eye. But no amount of legal action will undo the damage you've done. Michael, I hope you're sleeping well in your big empty house. I took a screenshot of this post. Saved it in the same folder, and closed the browser. Then the day of the hearing came. They showed up at the courthouse in San Jose. Looking tired, angry, and a little confused. My lawyer looked calm and confident. The judge listened to both sides. Studied the documents and ruled in my favor. The house was ordered to be sold. I was getting my share of the proceeds. And they had 90 days to pack up and vacate the property. And that's when the real silence set in. Not the cold, passive-aggressive resentment I'd grown accustomed to as a child. When I'd accidentally failed to laugh at my dad's joke or forgotten to bring deviled eggs to Thanksgiving dinner. No. It was a different kind of silence, deep. Empty. For the first time in their lives. They had no words for me. No demands. No expectations. I didn't celebrate. Didn't post about my victory on social media. Didn't even feel triumphant. I just breathed. It was a strange feeling to know that the people who raised you only loved you as long as you were useful to them. This realization was jarring, forcing me to re-examine every memory, every decision I'd made, and my sense of my own worth. But it was also liberating, the freedom to look within, to begin rebuilding my identity on my own terms, not on obligation and guilt. In the weeks that followed, I began to say no more often. No to being an emergency contact for people who only needed me in moments of crisis. No to paying for holidays where I was barely tolerated at the dinner table. No to going to birthday parties and barbecues where the smiles hid snide comments about how much I had changed. Maybe I had changed. Or maybe I had just stopped pretending. And just when life was finally beginning to settle into a new rhythm, when I was truly beginning to learn to live for myself and not for others' expectations, there was a knock at the door. It was early evening. The California sun was setting behind the hills, casting long golden shadows across my small backyard. I opened the door, and there stood my mother. She looked tired, wearing an old cardigan, holding a manila envelope. There was an unfamiliar uncertainty in her eyes, as if she was facing a completely different person. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I stood there silently. My hand was still on the doorknob, and a heavy silence hung between us, filled with years of being the convenient son, reliable, obedient, invisible. Years of holidays that I financed while remaining unnoticed. Years of gatherings, where I felt more like an obligated guest than a welcome family member. All of this stood between us in those few seconds of silence. And then I finally stepped aside and opened the door wider. I opened the door for her not because I wanted to let her in, but because I wanted to hear what she had come to say. An excuse, an apology, or whatever version of the truth she was carrying. Mom entered hesitantly, as if she wasn't sure she was welcome. She placed the envelope carefully on my kitchen counter, as if it might burn her fingers. I didn't offer her coffee or invite her to sit down in my living room. I just leaned against the wall, crossed my arms, and waited. My mother was wringing her hands, a childhood habit. One I remembered from when she was about to scold me for something trivial, a forgotten lunch money, muddy shoes in the house, or a smile that wasn't bright enough in family photos. "I didn't come here to fight," she said finally. I didn't say anything. I just. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "We didn't realize how much we were depending on you." I raised an eyebrow, but still didn't speak. "We didn't think you minded," she added quickly, as if trying to get it all out at once to lessen the weight of what she was saying. "You never complained. You always helped. We thought you liked it. Being needed." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because there was no other way to process such twisted logic. I had liked being part of a family. I had liked feeling valued. But being needed and being used weren't the same thing. One was about love. The other was about convenience. "You weren't just depending on me," I said quietly. "You were standing on me with both feet. And when I couldn't take it anymore, you acted like it was my fault." Her face seemed to crumple in on itself. She looked smaller than I remembered, more fragile. "We were wrong," she whispered. I was wrong. For one brief moment, I almost allowed myself to believe in the sincerity of those words. I almost forgot about all those years when I was treated like an ATM with feelings. About the wedding gifts I paid for but wasn't thanked for. About the graduation parties I wasn't invited to. About the family vacations they bragged about in my presence, knowing they hadn't even thought to include me, while still counting on my contribution to their budget. "What's in the envelope?" I asked, instead of giving in to the moment. Mom swallowed hard. "The house sold," she said quietly. She slid the envelope toward me. Inside was a cashier's check. My share of the sale proceeds. After all taxes, realtor fees, and legal expenses were deducted, it was a substantial sum, $127. Ling ling ling. Enough for a down payment on a new home. Or a year of travel. Or an investment that could quietly grow over time. I picked up the envelope, turned it over in my hands. It wasn't an apology. And it certainly wasn't reconciliation. It was just money. "Thank you," I said simply, and put the envelope in my kitchen drawer. My mother stood there, as if hoping that this gesture would be our olive branch. That we could pretend that nothing had happened. That years of neglect and exploitation could be erased with a few sad glances and a bank check. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. Mom. I began quietly. You're not a villain. I know that. You didn't wake up every morning thinking, how can I use Michael today? She blinked. Clearly surprised. Maybe even relieved. But good people do harmful things too. Out of thoughtlessness. Out of selfishness. Out of the belief that someone will always be there to clean up their messes. Her lips trembled. But no words came. Can you apologize? I continued calmly. And I will accept your apology. Honestly. I believe you are sorry. A tear rolled down her cheek. I didn't rush to comfort her. But that doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was. She flinched. As if I had slapped her. And in a way, maybe I had. Because for people like my mother, the worst thing isn't the yelling. Or the confrontation. Or even the exposure. The worst thing is losing access, losing the confidence that no matter how badly they behaved, you would still be there. I love you. I said. And I meant it. But I'm not going back to being the family ATM. I'm not going back to being the invisible safety net. I'm just going to be me. And you'll have to decide if that's enough for you. Mom nodded slowly. Heavily. As if each movement required enormous effort. Okay. She whispered. Okay. We stood there for a moment longer in that strange silence, awkward. Painful. But for the first time, truly honest between us. Then she turned and walked toward the door, without another word. When it clicked shut behind her, I didn't burst into tears. Didn't wrestle with doubt or regret. I didn't even feel empty. I felt free. The months that followed were quieter than I could ever remember. No panicked calls before holidays asking for catering deposits through Venmo. No more late-night texts about unexpected expenses. No birthday invitations accompanied by Cash App requests. I bought a new place, smaller. Simpler. A cozy townhouse in Redwood City with a small patio and a little cafe around the corner where the barista remembered my order by the third visit. I started traveling a little. Without much fanfare. Just short weekend trips to Monterey. Walks around Napa Valley. Hiking trails in Big Sur that I had been putting off for years. I learned to spend time with myself. Without feeling that my worth was measured by how many problems I could solve for others. And gradually, something else wonderful happened. Friends I had unwittingly pushed aside while dealing with other people's emergencies began to reach out. We would meet for drinks in Mountain View or San Francisco. Laughing until our sides hurt. Some even apologized for disappearing. They hadn't realized how much of my life was spent putting out other people's fires. I didn't rebuild the bridges with my family. But I left the door unlocked. Occasionally, a text would come from Jessica, a photo of her children, and a simple hope you're doing well. Trevor sent a Christmas card once. Just signed with his name. No guilt trips. No hidden agenda. Even my mother occasionally sent a short thinking of you through text. And sometimes that was enough. Because I understood something important. Family isn't about duty. Isn't about shared DNA. Isn't about silent endurance for the sake of keeping peace. Real family is about respect. About genuine desire to be close to each other. Not about obligation. And to understand that, I had to lose everything I thought was mine. And in that loss, in walking away from the version of family I had clung to for so long, I found something far more valuable. I found myself. Story 2. Marina Stevens parked her gray sedan at the curb and turned off the ignition. Rain pounded the windshield, blurring the outline of the familiar two-story colonial house. She hadn't planned to stop by her mother-in-law's. She was just returning home from work and decided to take a shortcut through this neighborhood in suburban Chicago. But when she saw Andrew's white SUV in the driveway, she involuntarily slowed down. Strange. Her husband was supposed to be at a meeting until late in the evening. At least that's what he said in the morning. Hurriedly finishing his coffee and grabbing his briefcase. And now it's only 6:30. Marina looked at her iPhone. No messages from her husband. Maybe the meeting ended early and he decided to visit his mother. Quite logical. Victoria Williams often complained that her son rarely came. She grabbed her purse and quickly walked to the front door. The house was drowning in twilight. Only the first floor gave light to the living room. Marina pressed the doorbell and listened. No one answered. Although voices were clearly audible. Maybe he can't hear because of the rain, she muttered under her breath and tried to open the door. To her surprise, the door was unlocked. Marina stepped over the threshold, shook off the raindrops and listened. Voices were coming from the living room. The familiar intonations of her husband, and the characteristic raspy voice of her mother-in-law. They were arguing heatedly about something. I'm telling you. This is the only way out. Victoria insisted. I don't have any more time. Bank of America has already filed a lawsuit. In a month, the property will be foreclosed. Mom. It's too risky. What if something goes wrong? What could go wrong? You yourself said that she has become strange and hot-tempered lately. Sometimes she breaks dishes. Sometimes she makes a scene at work. Marina froze at the entrance to the hallway. Who are they talking about, and why so quietly? Almost in a whisper, she is not strange. Mom. She's just tired. She has a lot of work with her father's company now. Well? You see. The mother-in-law's voice became triumphant. 165美元. 000. Do you understand what kind of money that is? What does she do with it? Nothing. She sits in her office. Play director. She doesn't play. She really runs the company. Andrew. Victoria's voice became brief. You're a smart boy. Think about it. Would a normal woman behave like that? Remember how she yelled at you yesterday because you were late at work, and last week she made a scene with the waitress at that restaurant. Marina caught her breath. Yes. She really had a fight with Andrew yesterday. He came home at 11:30. Although he promised to be there at 9. And the dinner was cold. And she spent 2 hours cooking. Is it abnormal to be upset? And in the restaurant, the waitress really was impolite. Mixed up the order twice, and also had the audacity to snap. Marina asked to speak to the manager. This is also abnormal. That doesn't mean that Andrew started it. It means exactly what I think it means. His mother interrupted. Depression. A nervous breakdown, at the very least. And maybe worse. Do you know that her father wasn't exactly mentally healthy either? Heredity is a serious thing. Marina pressed herself against the wall. Her father, Paul Stevens, was a bit eccentric. It's true. He was into philosophy. He could talk for hours about the meaning of life. But he was a brilliant software engineer. He created an IT company from scratch in Silicon Valley and turned it into a successful business. What does this have to do with mental health, Mom? Let's not go to extremes. No extremes. The mother-in-law's voice became harsh. Listen carefully. I've already talked to Dr. Peterson. He is ready to help us. Which doctor? Peterson. Peterson. A psychiatrist from Chicago General Hospital. Remember? I told you, we studied together in nursing school. He is now the head of the department. And what did he say? That everything is doable. You just need to prepare properly. Collect evidence of inappropriate behavior. Record several episodes of aggression. And then it's just a matter of technique. Marina felt her legs buckling. Does she really understand what they're talking about? So you're suggesting I suggest we solve our problem in a civilized and legal manner? Your wife is temporarily incapacitated due to health reasons. The court appoints you as her guardian. You get the right to manage her property. Sell the company. Pay off my debts with Wells Fargo. Put the rest of the money aside for your wife's treatment. And if she recovers, and if she does recover, there were notes of irritation in Victoria's voice. There won't be any money. That means she'll get sick again. From worry. The circle will close. Andrew was silent for a long time. Marina heard only the beating of her own heart, and the sound of rain outside the window. Are you serious? Mom, absolutely serious. I have 2 months. No more. If I don't find $6. Lube. I'll be left homeless. And you don't have that kind of money, but what is this? It's not fair. And what's fair about this girl inheriting something she didn't earn $165? Ling, ling, ling. For what? For being born a rich daddy's daughter. And you and I have worked hard all our lives to have at least something. She's not going away. Mom. She's my wife. And she's been working for the company for 5 years. She works. Victoria snorted. She sits in a nice office. Pretends to be important. And the real work is done for her by hired managers. That's not true. That's exactly it. I made inquiries. She even has a secretary there who brings coffee. And the decisions are made by the CTO and the CFO. She only signs. Marina clenched her fists. How dare this woman, she really works a lot. Studied management. Went to business school. Didn't sleep at night. Understanding the intricacies of business. Yes. She has assistants. But it is she who makes the final decisions. Let's say. Andrew said slowly. Let's say I agree. What should I do? Marina's heart sank. Was her husband really seriously discussing this? First. To record her outbursts of aggression on your phone. Every time she raises her voice, or breaks dishes. Second. Provoke such situations. Come home late. Forget about agreements. Do something that irritates her. I don't like this idea. You don't like the idea of saving your mother from foreclosure? Or do you like the idea of being henpecked by a rich wife your whole life, Mom? What? Mom, it's true. And you know it. She's already turned you into a house husband. You even bought a car with her money. We're married. We have joint property. Nothing in common. The company is registered to her personally. And the house too. And what do you have? An engineer's salary of $3. Sanbei. Marina heard Andrew sigh heavily. Okay. Let's say I'll record. What happens next? Then Dr. Peterson will conduct an independent examination. He'll find that she has bipolar disorder, or something like that. Recommends compulsory treatment. And the court will appoint you as guardian. And if she goes to another doctor, she won't. We'll make it so that she asks for treatment herself. We'll arrange her life in such a way that she'll think that she's really going crazy. How? It's simple. You'll move her things from one place to another. Deny that you told her anything. Pretend that you don't remember important conversations. Classique technique. Marina felt sick. Gaslighting. She had read about it in psychological articles. When the victim is methodically convinced that she perceives reality inadequately. Mom. This is some kind of sadism. This is necessity. And then she won't understand anything. She'll think that she really has problems with memory and perception. She'll want to get treatment herself. What if she guesses? She won't guess. She's too trusting and in love with you. Such women never suspect their husbands of anything bad. Andrew fell silent again. Marina stood in the dark hallway, feeling tears running down her cheeks. 12 years of marriage. 12 years. She considered this man the closest. The dearest. And he was ready to betray her for money. I have another idea. Victoria continued. You can organize a public scandal in a restaurant or a store. You will anger her on purpose. She will lose her temper in front of witnesses. This will be excellent evidence for the court. It is risky, but effective. Imagine. A decent, intelligent woman suddenly starts to throw a tantrum in a public place. Break dishes. Insult people. Everyone will think that she has gone crazy. And if she controls herself, she won't. I know her type. She flares up by nature. She just usually holds back. And we will create such conditions that it will be impossible to hold back. Marina heard the sound of liquid being poured. Apparently, someone decided to pour themselves some tea or coffee. When do we start? Andrew asked. Right now. Today. Come home very late. Around 11 o'clock. Say you were held up at work. And go somewhere to unwind. She'll probably make a scene. That'll be the first recording. What if she doesn't? She will. She's expecting you with dinner. She probably cooked something. Women don't like it when their efforts are not appreciated. Marina closed her eyes. Indeed. There was duck with apples in the oven at home. Andrew's favorite dish. She had been preparing it for 3 hours. Wanted to surprise her husband. And now she understood that this would be the perfect excuse for provocation. Okay, said Andrew. Let's try. Not try. But do it? We have no right to make a mistake. And remember, if she suspects something, everything will be in vain. So no random phrases. No hints. You are a loving husband who is concerned about his wife's mental health. Got it. And one more thing, don't even think about opening up to her. Even if you feel sorry for her. even if she cries and asks you to explain what's going on. Remember, it's not just my debts that are at stake, but your future as well. If I lose my house, I'll have nowhere to go. I'll be forced to move in with you. Andrew choked. With us, where else? I am your mother. And then it will be easier for me to observe her behavior. Record oddities. Collect evidence. Mom. This is a bad idea. This is the only idea we have. So either you help me voluntarily, or I will find a way to solve the problem myself. The mother-in-law's voice took on a threatening tone that gave Marina goosebumps. What do you mean? That's exactly what I mean. I have friends who don't shy away from dirty methods. They can arrange accidents for your wife or frame her for some crime. There are many ways. Mom. Are you crazy? No. She's the one who's crazy. And we are simply helping society notice this. Marina could no longer listen. Her hands were shaking so much that she could barely turn the door handle. She slipped out into the street, quickly walked to the car and got behind the wheel. The rain intensified. Large drops pounded the roof, drowning out the sounds of the outside world. Marina sat motionless, trying to comprehend what she had heard. Her own husband was planning to have her declared insane for the sake of money, to save his mother from foreclosure, and to become rich himself. 12 years. For 12 years, she had trusted this man, shared her most intimate things with him, made plans for the future, and he saw her only as a source of income. The phone vibrated. A text message from Andrew. Staying at work until 1100 p.m. Don't wait with dinner. Everything according to plan. Marina wiped away her tears and started the engine. She needed to go home and think. Think quickly and correctly. Because if she was wrong, she would lose not only her father's money and company, but also her freedom, dignity, and the opportunity to ever prove she was right. They want a war. They will get it. But not the kind they planned. Marina came home, and the first thing she did was take the duck out of the oven. The meat was already dry. The apples were dark. She threw everything in the trash. Let Andrew think that she forgot about dinner and didn't cook anything. The first surprise for her beloved husband. Then she went to her father's office on the second floor. After Paul Stevens' death, she changed practically nothing here. Only removed personal belongings and documents. An antique desk, a leather chair, shelves with technical books and philosophical treatises, and behind the painting, a small family secret, which only she and her father knew about. Marina dialed the code, her date of birth in reverse order, and opened the heavy safe door. Inside were her mother's jewelry, several stacks of hundreds for a rainy day, and the Sony recorder her father used to record business negotiations. A tiny device with excellent sound quality and 30 hours of memory. She picked up the recorder and checked the charge. The battery was full. Her father always took care of his equipment. Marina spent the next 2 hours at the computer, studying articles on recognition of incapacity, on the rights of guardians and on how to protect oneself from such schemes. There was a lot of information. But the main conclusion was simple: proving malicious intent is very difficult. But becoming a victim can be done in a matter of months. At 10:30, she heard the sound of a car in the driveway. Andrew returned exactly as planned. Marina quickly turned off the computer, hid the recorder in the pocket of her robe, and went downstairs. "Hello," said her husband, entering the foyer. "How are you?" He looked usual. A little tired, but calm. Not a shadow of guilt or embarrassment on his face. Marina felt how everything inside her was shrinking with anger. "Fine," she replied, trying to keep her voice even. "And how did your meeting go?" "It dragged on for a long time. You know how it is with these planning meetings." Lee number 1. Marina turned on the recording in her pocket. "I cooked duck with apples, but I already put it away. Should I heat it up?" "No need. I had a bite in the office." Andrew hung up his jacket and went into the living room. "Let's have some tea instead." Lee number 2. There was no one in their firm's office after 7:00 p.m. Marina knew that for sure. "Okay," she said, and went to the kitchen to put the kettle on. Andrew turned on the TV and settled into his recliner. He behaved in a completely natural, relaxed, homely manner, as if he hadn't been planning to ruin his wife's life a few hours ago. "How are things at the company?" he asked when she brought the tea. Good. Today we signed a contract with a new client. A large project for 6 months. That's great. Andrew took the cup. But didn't look particularly interested. Isn't it hard for you to do everything on your own? Why alone? I have a team. Well? Yes. A team. But you make the decisions. That's a big responsibility. Marina looked closely at her husband. It began. He was starting his preparations. Gently suggesting to her that the job was too difficult for her. I can handle it for now, she said. And if you can't handle it, Andrew leaned toward her, feigning concern. You've been a bit nervous lately. Maybe you should take a vacation. I'm not nervous. Oh. Come on. Yesterday, you yelled at me for being late. And last week you made a scene with the waitress. I didn't yell. I expressed my displeasure. And the waitress really was rude. Maybe you imagined it that way. Marina squeezed her cup harder. A classic trick to make the victim doubt their own perception of reality. I didn't imagine it. She got the order wrong twice and was rude. Okay. Okay. Andrew raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture. I don't want to argue. I'm just worried about you. They finished their tea in silence. Andrew scrolled through Facebook on his tablet. Marina pretended to watch TV. In reality, she was watching her husband. Trying to figure out when he turned into a stranger. Or maybe he had always been like this. She just didn't notice. Going to bed. Andrew hugged her. As usual. Good night. Darling. Good night. He fell asleep quickly. Apparently. Planning the betrayal did not bother him much. And Marina lay with her eyes open until the morning. Thinking over the plan of action. The next day began with a minor mischief. In the morning, Marina could not find the keys to the car. They weren't on the nightstand, where she always left them, but in the refrigerator behind a jar of pickles. Andrew. Have you seen my keys? What car keys? Her husband was drinking coffee in the kitchen. Not looking up from his phone. I always put them on the nightstand. Did you look carefully? Of course I did. They weren't there. That's strange. Maybe you put them somewhere else. You've become absent-minded lately. Marina found the keys half an hour later. When she showed them to her husband, he raised his eyebrows in surprise. In the refrigerator, how did they end up there? Good question. You were probably tired yesterday and mechanically put them there. It happens. The second day, the iPhone went missing. Marina found it in the washing machine. Luckily, before the wash cycle started. Andrew shook his head sadly. Darling. This is serious. Maybe you should see a doctor. Have your memory checked. On the third day, the car registration papers disappeared from the glove compartment. Andrew assumed that Marina could have moved them somewhere and forgotten. But I remember putting them in the glove compartment. Do you remember wanting to put them there? But in reality, you probably put them somewhere else. It's normal. It happens to everyone. By the end of the week, Marina was already beginning to doubt her own memory. Maybe she really had become absent-minded, or maybe it was all because of the stress at work. But on Friday evening, she caught Andrew red-handed, pretending to be asleep. She saw her husband quietly get out of bed, take her Apple Watch from the nightstand, and hide it in the linen drawer. In the morning, he asked with a worried look, "Where is your watch? Have you taken it off lately? I put it on the nightstand yesterday." Are you sure? Absolutely. Then it's strange that it's not there. Andrew pretended to be thoughtful. How long have you had memory problems? I don't have memory problems. Marina couldn't stand it. Please don't yell. It's not my fault that you lose things. At that moment, Marina realized it was time to go on the offensive. There was already enough evidence. The recorder in her pocket had recorded dozens of hours of conversations in which her husband systematically undermined her self-confidence. But first, she had to deal with her mother-in-law and her mysterious doctor, Peterson. Marina took a day off from work and went to Chicago General Hospital. At the information desk, it turned out that Peterson really does work as the head of the psychiatric department. An elderly man with a tired face and attentive eyes. I would like to consult about involuntary hospitalization, said Marina, introducing herself with a fictitious name. It's a complicated procedure. Peterson answered. There must be compelling reasons and a court decision. Do you suspect that one of your relatives has a mental disorder? I do. Marina admitted. I have become forgetful. I lose things. Sometimes I don't remember what I said, or did. I'm afraid that I'm going crazy. The doctor listened carefully to her complaints. Asked a few questions and shook his head. I don't see anything critical. Most likely. It's normal stress. But if you're worried about your memory, you can get tested. I'll refer you to a neurologist and a psychologist. And if my relatives think I need forced treatment, they'll have to prove it in court. Provide medical reports, witness statements, and documents about inappropriate behavior. The procedure is long and complicated, and doctors can make mistakes in their diagnoses. Peterson looked at her closely. They can. Of course. But rarely. Why are you asking? I'm just curious. Leaving the hospital. Marina was almost certain that Dr. Peterson was not involved in the conspiracy. In any case, for now, perhaps, her mother-in-law was simply using his name to make her plan seem real. But who was the doctor who should make the right diagnosis? The answer was found unexpectedly quickly. That evening, Victoria called Andrew. Marina heard the conversation through the thin wall between the kitchen and the living room. We're meeting with Dr. Williams tomorrow, said the mother-in-law. I made an appointment for 7:00 p.m. at Starbucks on Michigan Avenue. And who is that? A psychiatrist. Works in a private clinic. Agreed to help us for a fee. For what fee? $1. $100 for the correct diagnosis and another $1. $100 for agreeing to testify in court. Where did you get that kind of money? Borrowed from friends. Then I'll return it from the settlement. Marina recorded the conversation and immediately sat down to look for information about Dr. Williams on the internet. There were 3 private psychiatrists with that name in Chicago. One worked downtown, in an elite clinic. The second was seeing patients in a residential area. And the third had recently lost his license for unethical behavior. Intuition told her that it was the third one. The next day, at 6:30, Marina was already at the Starbucks on Michigan Avenue. She chose a table in the far corner, from where she had a good view of the entire cafe, and ordered coffee. The recorder was in her bag. Turned on. At 6:07, Victoria appeared. She looked around the cafe, chose a table by the window, and sat with her back to Marina. 10 minutes later, a man of about 50. Short. Plump. With sparse hair and nervous hand movements. Approached her. Marina took her laptop out of her bag and pretended to work. Although in reality she was listening intently. Fortunately, they were sitting close by, and the words were distinguishable. So, what's the situation? The man asked. Probably, Dr. Williams. I already explained on the phone. The daughter-in-law inherited a large sum. But she has mental problems. This needs to be officially recorded. What problems exactly? Depression. Outbursts of aggression. Forgetfulness. Her son records her behavior on his phone. This is not enough to recognize incapacity. And what is enough? A more serious disorder is needed. Bipolar, for example. Or paranoid tendencies. Can this be arranged? Yes. But it will cost more. How much? $3. Sambe. I will conduct an examination. Write a conclusion that the patient suffers from a severe mental disorder and cannot adequately assess her actions. I will testify in court. But what if she goes to another doctor? She will not. By the time it comes to court, we will have prepared her so that she herself will ask for treatment. How is that possible? There are different ways. You can mix mild psychotropic drugs into food. They cause anxiety, panic attacks, sleep disturbances. A person begins to think that he is going crazy. Marina caught her breath. Are they really going to drug her? Isn't it dangerous? Asked the mother-in-law. In small doses. No. The most that will happen is mild depression and increased nervousness. But it is very effective. Where can I get these drugs? I have them. I will leave you a set with instructions. But remember, the dosage must be precise. An overdose can lead to serious consequences. Victoria nodded understandingly. How much time will it take? A month for preparation. Then a month for legal proceedings. Everything will be ready by Christmas. Excellent. The mother-in-law took an envelope out of her purse. There are $1. 100 here. You will receive the rest after the court's decision. Doctor. Williams counted the money and hid the envelope in the inside pocket of his jacket. When do we start? Right now. Tomorrow, I will give you the drugs. And you start preparing the documentation. I know a judge who might be sympathetic. I need it. The fewer people who know, the better. We'll handle it with standard methods. They talked a little more about technical details. And then went their separate ways. Marina waited until they both left the cafe. And only then did she turn off the recorder. Now she had all the evidence. All that was left was to decide what to do with it. At home, her caring husband was waiting for her with a new portion of psychological pressure. Darling. I've been thinking. He began. She had barely crossed the threshold. Maybe you should take a vacation. You look tired. I look fine. Well? I don't know. It seems to me that you've lost weight and have dark circles under your eyes. Marina looked at herself in the mirror. Indeed. The last few days had not been easy. Constante tension. Lack of sleep. Stress. All of this was reflected in her appearance. Ordinary fatigue. Or maybe something more serious. Andrew came up to her. Put his hands on her shoulders. I read about depression online. It has many symptoms. Weight loss. Insomnia. Forgetfulness. Andrew. Stop. I'm just worried. You're my wife. I love you. And if you have problems, we should solve them together. There was such sincere concern in his voice that Marina almost felt sorry for him. Does he really believe that he is doing something good, or is he just very good at pretending I have no problems? She said firmly. Okay. Okay. Andrew raised his hands. If you don't want to talk, don't. But if you need anything, I'm always here. In the evening, when her husband fell asleep, Marina went down to the kitchen and carefully examined all the products, especially those that only she ate. Yogurts, granola, herbal teas. She hadn't noticed anything suspicious yet. But that didn't mean anything. Dr. Williams had promised to give the drugs tomorrow, which meant that she had to be especially careful. And tomorrow was the time to begin the counterattack. The next morning, Marina woke up with a clear plan of action. While Andrew was taking a shower, she quickly looked around the kitchen and found a small puncture in her favorite package of oatmeal. As if someone had injected liquid into it with a thin needle. Her heart started beating faster. It had begun. She pretended to eat oatmeal for breakfast. But in reality, she was eating yogurt from a new package and throwing the porridge into the garbage disposal. Andrew watched her with poorly concealed interest. How did you sleep? He asked. Fine. What happened? You were tossing and turning at night and saying something in your sleep. What exactly was I saying? I couldn't make it out. Something about work. I think. Ali? Marina knew perfectly well that she didn't talk in her sleep. This was a trait noted by everyone she had ever shared a room with. You must have been dreaming about something work-related. She answered calmly. In the office, Marina first called David Miller, the company's CTO. The man her father trusted more than anyone else. David. I need your help with a delicate matter. Listen. Marina. There is reason to believe that someone wants to gain control of the company by dishonest means. I need to be on the safe side. She told him everything about the overheard conversation. About her husband's attempts to break her psyche. About the plans to declare her incompetent. David listened, frowning more and more. Bastards. He said finally. Your father would turn over in his grave. What are you planning to do first? Secure the company's assets. Is it possible to temporarily require dual authorization for financial transactions? It is possible. We have a double signature system. Yours and mine. No one will withdraw large sums without my consent. Excellent. And also prepare documents on the transfer of powers in the event of my temporary incapacity. But not to my husband. But to you. Marina. Or maybe it would be better to contact the FBI right away. It is too early. I need more solid evidence. And I have a plan to get it. That afternoon, she went to see a private investigator. A stocky, middle-aged man named Victor Johnson, who had been recommended to her by a lawyer friend. I need to put 3 people under surveillance, Marina said. handing over photographs of Andrew, Victoria, and the fake psychiatrist, Dr. Williams, and to obtain dirt on the doctor. What's the matter? Marina briefly outlined the situation. The investigator listened attentively and shook his head. Yeah. It's a popular scheme. In recent years, relatives often try to take away an inheritance under the guise of caring for mental health. I've had about 5 such cases. And were you able to help? In 3 cases. Yes. In 2 cases, we didn't have time. The victims had already been declared incompetent. So you have little time. What do you advise? First, document everything. Every conversation. Every attempt at manipulation. Second, find independent witnesses of your adequate behavior. Third, collect evidence of a conspiracy against you. I am already working on the 3rd point. Good. And I will take care of surveillance and checking this pseudo-doctor. If he really had lost his license for violations, that would be a great trump card. That evening, Marina found another surprise at home. Her herbal tea also had a barely noticeable hole in the packaging. She brewed the tea but didn't drink it, pouring the contents of the cup into the sink when Andrew turned away. You haven't been eating much lately, her husband remarked at dinner. I eat normally. Come on. You didn't finish your oatmeal this morning. You don't drink tea in the evening. Maybe you've lost your appetite, I just don't feel like it. It's hot outside. Or maybe it's a side effect of stress. Do you know that constant tension can affect digestion? Marina could hardly contain herself. Every word he said was calculated to make her doubt herself. Andrew. Stop diagnosing me. I'm an adult. I know what's happening to me. Of course you know. It's just that sometimes it's easier to see from the outside. The next day, the investigator sent the first results. Dr. Stephen Williams really did lose his medical license 2 years ago for taking bribes and falsifying certificates. Now he worked as a consultant in a dubious private clinic specializing in paid medical exemptions for the military and fake disability claims. In addition, Victor Johnson established that Victoria really owed Bank of America a large sum. Her house was mortgaged for a loan that she could not repay. There was less than a month left before the foreclosure. The motive is clear, the investigator said on the phone. Now we need evidence of active actions against you. I have it. Audio recordings of planning. Attempts to slip drugs into food. This is not enough. You need to catch them in the act. For example, record the transfer of money to the doctor, or the moment of mixing substances into food. How to do this? Install hidden cameras in the house or provoke them to a frank conversation in the presence of witnesses. Marina chose the second option. The next day, she called Victoria. I feel bad. I probably need to go to the doctor. What happened? Dear, there was a poorly concealed note of joy in her mother-in-law's voice. I don't know. I'm sleeping poorly. I've become forgetful. I have no appetite. Andrew says it could be depression. It could be depression. This is serious. You know. You definitely need to see a specialist. But which one? I don't know a single good psychiatrist. But I do. Victoria could not contain her enthusiasm. There is one wonderful doctor. Dr. Williams. Very experienced. Attentive. I can arrange an appointment. That would be great. Of course. Of course. I will call him right now. And don't worry. Dear? We will help you. In the evening, Andrew came home in high spirits. Mom says you agreed to go to the doctor. It was the right decision. What else could I do? You keep telling me every day that I'm acting strange. I'm not telling you that. I'm just worried. And it's good that you finally listened. When is the appointment? The day after tomorrow at 4:00 p.m. Mom made arrangements. Will you come with me? Definitely. I have to tell the doctor about your behavior. It's easier to see from the outside. As I've already said, on the appointed day, Marina came to the clinic half an hour early. Quickly found William's office and knocked. Come in. A familiar voice rang out. Doctor. Williams was sitting at the desk, sorting through some papers. Zing Marina. He was a little confused. And where is your husband? I was told you'd come together. He's running late. He told me to start without him. Understood. Williams turned on the recorder on the table. Well, tell me about your complaints. Marina took her own recorder out of her bag. More powerful and high quality. And put it next to his device. What is this for? The doctor was surprised. I want to record the consultation for my husband. What if I forget something or convey it incorrectly? No need. I have my own recorder. And I'm used to being in control. You know. You can't do without it in business. Williams shrugged. As you wish. So. What are you complaining about? Forgetfulness. Poor sleep. Loss of appetite. My husband says that I have become nervous and aggressive. When did this start?